Grayson Grundhoefer, SicEm365.com, co-host of the Bearcast, also is our college football analyst, among many others, and handles all of everything, basically recruiting. Joins us on 365 Sports. Grayson, let's start with your reaction to yesterday's news about Ron Roberts and Ronnie Wheat both out.
Right. I mean, what a crazy day, right? To see that kind of come on, at the exact same time, the report, of course, by Colt Barber. And, it was one of those situations where you saw a defense that had just played so good in the 2021 season. And there were these huge expectations that in 2022, they would take another step forward and, potentially be better. I know some people thought they could be even better than the 2021 defense. I think that was probably unfair expectations, but I think one consistent theme is if you looked at all the guys on the defense, there were very few guys that I think you could point to and say, wow, he had a great offseason and made a big jump in the defense. And I think that was a problem. You didn't see the same kind of development that you saw from the 2020 season to the 2021 season. And I think, that showed up on the field. So apparently, Dave Aranda decided that it was time to make a move. And we saw after the 2020 season when he revamped the entire offensive staff, how well that worked. And so I think we could see the same thing with this move right here. And now Dave is going to be able to formulate a staff that he feels like will be more cohesive and just in general better going into the 2023 season.
Grayson, I think that the defense was a little bit overshadowed by the kind of up and down nature of Blake Shapen this year, and fans like to hone in on the quarterback. But when you really look at the offensive output that they had this year, if the defense and special teams had just been a little bit better, this is not a 6-6 team.
Yeah, I think it's perfectly said when you say the offense had some really high highs and some really low lows. And this defense was not good enough to cover up for those lows, if that makes sense. And so even when the offense played well, like the West Virginia game, the defense just had one of their worst performances of the year, and it cost them. And I'm not going to say that the offense was perfect in that game because they weren't. They had some costly turnovers. But I would also say if you watch that game, there's no way you could leave that game and think, wow, the defense played a solid game of football, because they did. And we saw that at various times this year. Against Oklahoma this year, they gave up a ton of points and a ton of yards. Late in games, when you look at the Kansas State game, they got ran over. And then, of course, the Texas game at the end of the year was just kind of this just what's going on type dilemma where we haven't seen a Dave Aranda defense get ran over like they did in the fourth quarter against Texas. And you had kind of seen a team that just kind of looked defeated. So, yeah, I'm right there with you as far as the defense was not to the level that I think we all expected, and the defense wasn't able to make up for some of the mistakes of the offense. But make no mistake about it, both sides of the football had major faults in what led to a 6-6 season. They both need to be better a year from now.
So speaking of Blake Shapen, sort of, kind of, he's in what is a little bit of an emptier quarterback room at the moment. Look around and he's all by himself actually at the moment. Now that Kyron Drones has entered the transfer portal, Austin Novosad, obviously not arriving just yet. Grayson, what do you make of Drones jumping into the portal, leaving the door open perhaps for a return to Waco? I don't think that comes as much of a surprise, but just kind of wrapping your head around everything the last 24 hours. What do you think about the quarterback room?
Well, the Kyron Drones news, I think, was one of those that I'm not going to say that it was expected, but I think that we all kind of got this sense of, what's he going to do? Is he going to come back and try to compete with Blake Shapen for the job next year, or is he going to sit back and say, hey, I didn't get my shot this year. Maybe it's time to go look for a place where I can for sure be the starter. But whatever the case is, him leaving the door open to come back makes a lot of sense, because if he does come back, he'll get a chance to compete for the starting spot. But also him entering the portal makes sense for him, right? Because he can potentially find a place where he can start right away. Now, as far as Baylor goes, they're going to have to figure out the quarterback room, because you have Blake Shapen, you're going to get Austin Novosad here in, I guess, a little over a month or so. And so he'll be there for spring ball, which is great. That's great news. But you still need more than just two scholarship quarterbacks in your quarterback room, which leads me to believe that they're probably going to have to take a transfer, or they're going to have to figure out a way to maybe take another high school guy. They have a lot of work to do. And it's kind of a weird situation to be in, because during this whole period of figuring out the 2023 class, they decided to not take a 2022 quarterback. They decided to add walk-ons instead of adding, another scholarship quarterback, which worked out fine, I guess, for this year. But going forward, now you're sitting there and you're like, okay, we're going to have 2 scholarship quarterbacks and not a lot of depth behind them. And as we saw this year, Blake Shapen missed a game. And we saw the year before, Gary Bohannon missed 2 games, and Blake Shapen had to come in. And we've seen in the past with Baylor quarterbacks, where guys get hurt and backups have to step in. And we've seen them go as deep as, 4 deep in previous seasons. So it's going to be really important that they try to find someone to create more depth and more competition going into spring football and, of course, into the fall.
Obviously, go ahead. You're going to ask.
How vulnerable do you think Blake Shapen would really be if they brought somebody in?
That's a good question. I personally believe that it needs to be an open competition, which leaves any quarterback very vulnerable. I mean, we saw this past year with Gary Bohannon coming back after playing really solid football and leading the team to a Big 12 championship and Sugar Bowl. We saw Blake Shapen, who had a great end of the season, take the job from him in the spring. So you're going to be vulnerable in those situations, but I also think that that's kind of what Blake Shapen needs at this point. I'm not going to sit here and say he was terrible this year, because he wasn't, but I'm also not going to sit here and say he was great, because he wasn't. He was somewhere in between. So this is a guy that needs to take big steps this offseason. And I think he's going to get pushed by a guy like Austin Novosad. And then if they bring in someone, he's going to get pushed as well, which, again, I think that competition will breed a different level of play from the quarterback position next year. And that's what Baylor, frankly, needs.
I don't want to put you on the spot, but I will ask this question. If you were drafting and it was Blake Shapen and Austin Novosad, and you had to make a draft, that was going to be your starter, you were the one making that decision, who would you pick?
That's a great question, Smokey. And I would say that I think it's kind of twofold, right? Because I think the answer right now would have to be Blake Shapen, because we've never seen Austin Novosad pick up a football on a college football field. We've never seen him go through, the conditioning and the weight room stuff that you have to go through to be a college football athlete. We've never seen him go through the playbook study and learn a Jeff Grimes scheme before. I just think there's so many question marks. Now, if you're going to ask me, I get to pick one for the future of Baylor, so I get, 3 or 4 years in this decision, then it's Austin Novosad for sure, because the upside, the talent, everything that you see from him, he's got it all. He's got all the characteristics that make up a great college quarterback and a potential pro quarterback. But if you're asking me just for next year, I think it's really hard for anyone to say that someone other than Blake Shapen should be the starter, based on the fact that there's not a lot of competition in the room, and then your only other option is a true freshman quarterback who we've never gotten to see throw a football in a college game. So I think that's where I'd kind of be at right now.
I know there's notes on the premium side of the board for subscribers and whatnot, so I know you can't reveal everything in regards to Baylor's game plan at the moment, but what's raised your eyebrows interest-wise in terms of the transfer portal and recruiting here as I don't know about this December 21st National Signing Day, Grayson, for one, but as we still have another 3 weeks to go, what's kind of bubbling on that front as far as personnel goes?
Right. So the signing day is December 21st, like you mentioned, and it runs through the 23rd. So Baylor's still looking at filling a couple spots maybe in this 2023 class. I know Hutchinson Community College, JUCO nose tackle, Jarrell Boykins is a guy that they're definitely looking at. I think he'll probably take a visit here in the next week or so. And he's a big-time prospect as far as being, 6'3", 322 pounds. He fills a position of need for them if they were able to land him, because they're likely going to lose Apu to the NFL draft. They're going to lose Sheedy, who played nose tackle. They're going to lose Jackson Player, who also played some nose tackle. So they really need to figure out a way to shore up that position. And Boykins is the guy that could do that in the interim, because I think they're going to need to find probably 2 nose tackles so that they have some depth there to go along with these young guys that they have, with Trey Emery, who was in the 2022 class. And then, of course, the 2 young guys, DK Kalu and Brendan Bett, who both could potentially play nose tackle as well. But those guys need some time. They need to figure out some guys who can fill that position in the immediate future. So that's kind of the first part of it. Then as far as the transfer portal goes, guys, if you think the past couple days have been crazy with the transfer portal, just wait till Monday when you start seeing all the guys who said, "Hey, I'm gonna enter the portal." They're gonna officially enter on the 5th, and you're gonna see a ton of underclassmen as well enter on December 5th as well. It's gonna be a crazy day, so you're gonna see a lot of talent just kind of go towards the portal, and that's also why this Baylor staff's gonna wait a little bit and try to figure out, hey, who's there, figure out who's actually in the portal, figure out who fits their needs, and then kind of go with it from there. The only one that I know Baylor is in on currently out of the transfer portal where I know, hey, they've offered this guy, I know for a fact that there's a ton of interest, is the Stanford grad transfer safety Jonathan McGill, who has at Coppell, was a defensive MVP for his district his senior, and had a really, really productive year at Stanford this past season. So he's a guy that I know they really, really like. He's a guy who I think fits what they need as far as he was a captain at Stanford. He could play the star position at Baylor. He could also play a couple other spots at safety, but I really view him as a very, very good star prospect and the guy that could come in, contribute right away, and be very much a Jalen Petrie light for this defense, which I think is something they were missing this past year.
Grayson, last question is, has there been any at all concern from anybody who's committed to Baylor on the changes in the staff?
I'm glad you asked this question because I kind of wanted to give an answer to this, but all the defensive guys that I've talked to, I think the constant theme is, wow, completely shocked by the news, had no idea this was coming, this is crazy, but still locked into Baylor and very much trust Dave Aranda and his process. And that's kind of the news that I've gotten, from 5 or 6 of the defensive prospects in this class. So it very much seems like, shocked that it happened, can't believe that it happened, but also we trust Dave Aranda, we trust this program, still very much locked into Baylor. So right now I would say of the guys that I've talked to, it hasn't been all of them quite yet, but of the ones that I have gotten a hold of, it's been very positive as far as, their commitment to Baylor and kind of them looking forward to coming to Baylor, even with the loss of Ron Roberts and Ronnie Lee. If
you don't mind a follow-up, is there any kind of discussion among those who are prospects or commitments or in recruiting circles that Aranda is churning his coaching staff a lot and you never know who you might play for?
No, absolutely not. I haven't gotten any indication of that from any prospects. I know that there's a lot of speculation on Jeff Grimes about him potentially, going to this place or that place again. I think that my guess is he would only leave if it's a head coaching job, just based on kind of what I've heard and his track record. I'm not sure that he would leave for that. He would be one, of course, that would be very interesting if he did leave. That could shift some things. I think in this specific instance and kind of what you're talking about, no, because frankly, when Dave Aranda has decided to make a decision to go with a new coordinator or make a coaching change, it's worked out for this team and for this program. And so I think these guys very much trust what Dave Aranda is building, and they trust his judgment at the end of the day.
Thank you, Grayson. Have a great weekend. Grayson Grundhoefer, SicEm365.com, co-host of the Bearcast, recruiting coordinator and college football analyst with us. And coming